Ministers, members of parliament, former ministers, former members of parliament, dear chargé d'affaires of the Embassy of the State of Palestine here in Sri Lanka, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, really pleased to see all of you here today standing in solidarity with the Palestinian people. If you may allow me this year to say a few words before I read the message of the Secretary General of the United Nations. I want to first express my gratitude to the Sri Lanka Committee for Solidarity with Palestine for its steadfast advocacy for the rights of Palestinians since 1975. I also want to take a moment to thank Sri Lanka for its strong engagement in solidarity with Palestinian people, with the United Nations, or at the United Nations. The recent vote joining 124 other nations in the General Assembly condemning Israel's unlawful presence in the occupied Palestinian territories, or Sri Lanka's decision to join the letter condemning the restrictions of the UN Secretary General, demonstrating its support for multilateral principles and justice. Sri Lanka's leadership as chair of the UN Special Committee to investigate Israeli practices affecting Palestinian human rights. And also, as the country has faced its own economic crisis, Sri Lanka has contributed significant voluntary contributions to UNRWA to ensure some continuity for its essential and irreplaceable services in Gaza and elsewhere. And as the war has expanded now in Lebanon, Sri Lanka contributes 126 peacekeepers to UNIFIL as a force protection, playing an important role in securing the base and the operations of UNIFIL. 2 Sri Lankan peacekeepers were injured recently by attacks of the Israeli Defense Forces on UNIFIL positions. This current war in the Middle East, or recently the refusal of some Rome Statute signatories to enforce the ICC arrest warrants, add elements to the long list of setbacks that continue to erode our rule-based international order. How much more can it endure? Future generations and history will not look kindly at how this order was destroyed over decades when member states, especially powerful ones, starting with permanent members of the Security Council, have buried or blurred principles and excelled at hypocrisy and double standards in favor of their narrow interests, promoting a worldview dominated by a zero-sum game. We need to rescue that order. We need to stand for the United Nations Charter, international law, and international humanitarian law, not only because it offers guardrails to provide and preserve human rights, but also because they have been an engine of prosperity and stability in a world that increasingly is interdependent and has to face shared global challenges. So with that, let me read you the message of the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. Every year on this day, the international community stands in solidarity for the dignity, rights, justice, and self-determination of the Palestinian people. This year, commemoration is especially painful, as those fundamental goals are as distant as they have ever been. Nothing justifies the 7th of October attacks by Hamas and the taking of hostages. And nothing justifies the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. Yet more than a year later, Gaza is in ruins. More than 43,000 Palestinians, mostly women and children, have been reportedly killed, and the humanitarian crisis is getting worse by the day. This is appalling and inexcusable. Meanwhile, in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, Israeli military operations, settlement expansion, evictions, demolitions, settler violence, and threats of annexations are inflicting further pain and injustice. It is past time for an immediate ceasefire and the unconditional release of all hostages, an end to the unlawful occupation of the Palestinian territory as confirmed by the International Court of Justice and the General Assembly, and irreversible progress towards a two-state solution in line with international law and relevant UN resolutions, with Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security, and Jerusalem as the capital of both states. As a matter of urgency, I appeal for full support of life-saving humanitarian relief for the Palestinian people, in particular through the work of UNRWA, which represents an irreplaceable lifeline for millions of Palestinians. The United Nations will continue to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people and their inalienable rights to live in peace, security, and dignity. Thank you very much.